What if you could influence anyone without them even realizing it? This audiobook uncovers the hidden psychology of persuasion, revealing the secret triggers that make people say, "Oh, yes." Master the art of influence. Take control of every interaction and reshape your reality, starting now. Introduction. Imagine for a moment that you could walk into any room and immediately command attention, not with arrogance, not with force, but with a quiet, undeniable power that makes people instinctively listen, trust, and follow your lead. What if you had the ability to shape opinions, guide decisions, and persuade effortlessly, not just in business or leadership, but in everyday interactions? Picture yourself closing deals without resistance, earning respect without demanding it, and influencing outcomes before a single word leaves your mouth. Now, let me ask you, how often have you been influenced without even realizing it? How many times have you bought something you didn't need, agreed to something against your better judgment, or followed someone's lead without questioning why? The truth is, influence is happening to you every single day, whether you recognize it or not. Every advertisement you see, every social interaction you have, every decision you make is subtly shaped by psychological forces that operate beneath the surface of conscious thought. The real question isn't whether you're being influenced, it's whether you know how to influence back. This audiobook isn't just about learning the mechanics of influence, it's about mastering the game. Whether you're a business leader, entrepreneur, negotiator, or simply someone who wants to move through the world with greater power and confidence, what you're about to discover will forever change the way you see communication, persuasion, and human behavior. What to expect from this audiobook? This is not just another book on persuasion filled with surface-level tips and generic advice. This is a deep psychological dive into the principles, strategies, and techniques that shape human behavior at its core. We will uncover the hidden triggers that cause people to say yes, reveal the unconscious biases that guide decisions, and expose the psychological loopholes that marketers, leaders, and influencers use to steer the actions of others. Each chapter will break down powerful psychological techniques, from the art of framing and storytelling to the science of authority, social proof, and scarcity. You'll discover how to read people like an open book, how to adjust your messaging to be irresistible, and how to structure your words and actions in ways that make your influence almost impossible to resist. But here's the real secret. You don't have to be naturally charismatic, manipulative, or even outspoken to be a master of influence. The most powerful influencers in the world are not necessarily the loudest or the most aggressive. They are the ones who understand the subtle psychological push and pull of persuasion, who know when to speak and when to stay silent, who can guide people's thoughts without them ever feeling pressured. By the time you finish this audiobook, you won't just understand influence, you'll own it. You'll know exactly how to shape conversations, direct attention, and get what you want without force or conflict. You will become someone who others naturally trust, respect, and follow. The power of psychological influence in everyday life. Think about this. Every major decision in history has been driven by influence. Wars have been won, governments have risen and fallen, and billion-dollar businesses have been built. Not just through brute force or sheer luck, but through the ability to persuade, inspire, and lead. Influence isn't just about sales, marketing, or leadership. It's about everything. Every time you negotiate a raise, ask someone out on a date, convince your child to do their homework, or inspire a team to follow your vision, you are using influence, whether you realize it or not. The problem is, most people are playing this game blindly. They stumble through conversations, hoping to be convincing, without truly understanding the deep psychological forces that drive human behavior. They rely on logic alone, believing that people make decisions rationally, when in reality, decisions are almost always driven by emotion, subconscious patterns, and cognitive biases. Here's a shocking truth. The person with the most facts doesn't always win the argument. The best product doesn't always sell the most. The most qualified person doesn't always get the promotion. Because success in influence isn't about having the best case. It's about knowing how to present it in a way that makes people feel compelled to act. Once you master this, your entire world changes. In business, you'll close deals faster, negotiate with ease, and create messaging that makes people desperate to say yes. In social settings, you'll command attention without effort, read people's true thoughts, and form deeper, more meaningful connections. In personal relationships, you'll understand how to navigate conflict, gain trust, and create the kind of influence that inspires loyalty and admiration. When you know how influence truly works, you are no longer at the mercy of it. You are in control of it. Ethical considerations and the responsible use of influence. Now, before we go any further, let's address the elephant in the room. Can these techniques be used unethically? Absolutely. And unfortunately, they often are. Politicians, marketers, and manipulators throughout history have used these exact same principles to deceive, manipulate, and exploit others for their own gain. That's why this book isn't just about power. It's about responsibility. Influence is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for harm. A knife can be used to prepare a meal or to inflict harm. Fire can warm a home or burn it down. The same applies to the power of psychological influence. You are about to learn techniques that can dramatically impact how people think, feel, and behave. The moral weight of that knowledge is in your hands. My goal in sharing this is not to teach you how to manipulate, deceive, or coerce, but rather to empower you, to ensure that you are never on the receiving end of someone else's manipulation, to help you recognize when these tactics are being used against you, and to equip you with the skills to persuade with integrity, confidence, and authenticity. The best influencers don't force people, they lead them. They create genuine value, build real trust, and use persuasion as a way to help, not exploit. That is the difference between manipulation and true influence. One is based on deception and control. The other is based on trust, respect, and alignment. So, as you go through this audiobook, I challenge you. Use what you learn wisely. Use it to become a leader people respect, not fear. Use it to create win-win situations, not to take advantage of others. Because when influence is used ethically and effectively, it doesn't just help you get what you want. It makes the world a better, more connected, and more inspiring place. Are you ready? You now stand at a crossroad. You can continue through life being unknowingly influenced by others, never truly understanding why you say yes, why you trust certain people, or why some individuals command respect the moment they walk into a room. Or you can choose to master the game, to unlock the hidden psychology behind influence and take control of your own power. In the chapters ahead, you will learn secrets that most people will never know. You will gain insights that can transform your career, your relationships, your confidence, and your ability to succeed in any situation. But knowledge alone is not enough. You must be willing to apply it, experiment with it, and step into a new version of yourself, one that influences effortlessly and leads with purpose. The question is, are you ready to begin? Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Understanding the Human Mind. The human mind is a labyrinth of thoughts, emotions, biases, and cognitive shortcuts. It is not the rational, logical processor that we often like to believe it is. Instead, it is a dynamic, ever-shifting system influenced by evolutionary biology, past experiences, and subconscious mechanisms. Understanding how the mind works is the first step in mastering the art of psychological influence. If you know how people think, you can predict their behaviors, guide their decisions, and subtly steer their perceptions without them even realizing it. This chapter explores the psychological underpinnings of influence, diving into cognitive biases, subconscious triggers, and the profound impact of emotions on decision-making. The subconscious mind, the silent puppeteer. The majority of our decisions, thoughts, and reactions occur beneath the surface of conscious awareness. Neuroscientists estimate that over 90% of cognitive processing happens subconsciously, meaning we often act without fully understanding why. This subconscious processing exists because the brain, despite its immense complexity, is fundamentally a pattern recognition machine. It seeks efficiency, relying on heuristics, mental shortcuts, to make quick decisions without expending excessive energy. These heuristics allow us to navigate the world effortlessly, but they also make us susceptible to influence. Consider the classic example of priming. In one study, participants who were exposed to words related to old age, such as gray, wrinkle, and retirement, unconsciously walked more slowly when they left the experiment. They had no idea they had been influenced. Similarly, marketing campaigns use color psychology, repetition, and subconscious cues to evoke emotions that drive purchasing decisions. When you see a red sale sign, your brain associates it with urgency and scarcity, compelling you to act fast. The subconscious mind is always listening, absorbing, and reacting, even when we believe we are in control. Cognitive biases, the illusions that shape reality. We like to believe that we see the world as it truly is. However, our perceptions are skewed by cognitive biases, which are systematic errors in thinking that affect our judgments and decisions. These biases have evolved as survival mechanisms, helping early humans make quick decisions in dangerous environments. However, in the modern world, they often lead us astray, making us vulnerable to persuasion and manipulation. One of the most powerful biases is the confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that supports our existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. This is why political debates rarely change minds. People filter information to reinforce what they already believe. A skilled influencer understands this and presents arguments in a way that aligns with the listener's pre-existing views, making persuasion more seamless. Another common bias is the anchoring effect, where people rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive when making decisions. Imagine you are shopping for a watch. The first one you see costs $10,000. The second one costs $2,500. The second watch now seems like a bargain, even though it is still expensive. This principle is used in sales, salary negotiations, and even courtroom verdicts. The initial reference point, or anchor, distorts our perception of value. Social proof is another powerful bias. We tend to assume that if many people believe or do something, it must be correct. This is why online reviews, testimonials, and follower counts have such an enormous impact on consumer behavior. A person who sees a restaurant packed with diners is more likely to trust that it serves good food, even if they have never tasted it themselves. Social proof is a shortcut the brain takes to avoid uncertainty, and those who understand this can use it to build credibility, attract followers, and sway public opinion. The role of emotion in decision-making. While we like to think of ourselves as logical beings, research consistently shows that emotions drive most of our decisions. The brain processes emotions faster than rational thought, meaning we often feel before we think. This has profound implications for influence. If you can tap into someone's emotions, you can guide their decisions without them even realizing it. For example, fear is a powerful motivator. Political campaigns, insurance companies, and even public health organizations use fear-based messaging to encourage compliance. However, fear alone is not enough. It must be paired with a solution. If you tell someone that a certain habit is dangerous, but do not provide a clear alternative, they may shut down or resist the message. This is why an effective influencer understands not just how to evoke emotions, but how to direct them toward a desired action. Similarly, the power of storytelling lies in its ability to create emotional resonance. People do not remember statistics, but they remember compelling narratives. A company selling eco-friendly products could list a dozen facts about carbon emissions, but what truly persuades people is a heartfelt story about a child growing up in a polluted city, struggling with asthma. This emotional connection makes the issue feel personal, which is far more influential than numbers alone. System 1 versus System 2. Thinking: the battle between instinct and logic. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, in his groundbreaking book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, describes two modes of thinking that govern our decision-making: System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and automatic. It operates effortlessly, making snap judgments based on instinct and past experiences. This system is what we rely on when we react emotionally, follow gut feelings, or make quick decisions without deep analysis. It is also the system that advertisers, politicians, and salespeople target because it is easily influenced by emotion, social proof, and subconscious cues. System 2, on the other hand, is slow, deliberate, and logical. It requires mental effort, weighing pros and cons, analyzing data, and thinking critically. While System 2 is capable of rational thought, it is also lazy. It does not like to be engaged unless absolutely necessary. Most people believe they make decisions using System 2, but in reality, System 1 is in control far more often than they realize. A master influencer understands how to bypass System 2 and target System 1. This is why political speeches use simple slogans rather than complex arguments. It is why advertisements focus on emotions rather than detailed product specifications. If you can engage System 1 effectively, you can shape people's decisions without them even realizing they are being influenced. Understanding the human mind is the foundation of psychological influence. By recognizing the role of the subconscious, cognitive biases, emotions, and dual system thinking, you gain an edge in persuasion. Influence is not about forcing people to do something against their will. It is about guiding them to a conclusion that feels natural to them. As we move forward in this book, we will build on these psychological principles to explore advanced persuasion techniques, real-world applications, and ethical considerations. Influence is a tool, and like any tool, its impact depends on the skill of the user. Now that you have peered into the depths of the human mind, you are one step closer to mastering the game. Chapter 2: The Science of Persuasion. Persuasion is not an art based solely on charisma or charm. It is a science built upon decades of psychological research. While some individuals may naturally exude influence, true persuasion is rooted in cognitive mechanisms that dictate human behavior. Understanding the scientific principles of persuasion allows one to craft messages, shape perceptions, and direct decisions with precision. The process of persuasion is neither arbitrary nor mysterious. Rather, it follows predictable psychological patterns that have been studied, tested, and refined. In this chapter, we will dissect the key principles behind the science of persuasion, exploring the mechanics that govern human compliance, decision-making, and belief formation. The psychological foundations of persuasion. The human brain is designed for efficiency. Instead of analyzing every piece of information critically, it relies on heuristics, mental shortcuts, to make decisions quickly and with minimal effort. This tendency to automate responses is precisely what makes persuasion possible. If every decision had to be processed with deep, logical reasoning, persuasion would be incredibly difficult. However, because the brain seeks efficiency, it often defaults to pre-programmed responses, making it susceptible to persuasive techniques. Research in social psychology has shown that persuasion is most effective when it aligns with innate human drives, such as the need for security, social belonging, consistency, and reciprocity. This is why advertising campaigns, political speeches, and marketing strategies often rely on universal emotional triggers. People do not respond to mere information. They respond to how that information makes them feel. A well-crafted persuasive message does not simply present facts. It guides the audience's emotions, creating an internal motivation to act. One of the most significant discoveries in persuasion research is that people are more likely to be influenced when they believe they are making a decision voluntarily. This is known as the autonomy principle. If someone feels they are being forced or manipulated, they resist. However, if they believe they are reaching a conclusion on their own, they embrace it. Effective persuasion is therefore subtle, creating an illusion of choice while guiding individuals toward a predetermined outcome. Cialdini's 6 Principles of Influence. Dr. Robert Cialdini, a leading psychologist in the field of persuasion, identified 6 universal principles of influence that govern human behavior. These principles explain why people comply with requests, change their opinions, and follow leaders. Mastering these principles provides an unfair advantage in persuasion, allowing one to shape behavior effortlessly. 1. Reciprocity, the power of obligation. Humans are wired to repay favors and kindness. This instinct stems from evolutionary survival. Early societies thrived by ensuring mutual cooperation. Today, this principle is deeply ingrained in social behavior. If someone gives us something, we feel psychologically compelled to return the favor. This is why charities send free gifts in donation requests, and why businesses offer free samples. The moment we accept something, we feel an unspoken obligation to reciprocate. This principle is highly effective in persuasion. A salesperson who provides free advice before making a pitch increases the likelihood of a sale. A negotiator who concedes a small point first increases the chances that the other party will reciprocate with a concession of their own. The key to leveraging reciprocity is to give first, knowing that the instinct to return the favor will work in your favor. 2. Commitment and consistency. The power of identity. Once people publicly commit to a belief or action, they feel a strong psychological need to remain consistent with it. This is because inconsistency is perceived as weakness or indecisiveness. By getting someone to agree to a small commitment, you make it easier to influence them into larger commitments later. This is why businesses offer low-risk trial memberships. Once customers have identified themselves as users of a product, they are far more likely to continue using it. Similarly, in negotiations, getting someone to agree on a small principle early makes them more likely to agree on larger issues later. The key to using this principle effectively is to align persuasion with the person's self-image. If someone believes they are a generous person, framing a request as a way to help others makes them more likely to comply. 3. Social proof. The power of the crowd. Humans are social creatures who look to others for guidance on how to behave. If we see a large number of people supporting a belief, buying a product, or following a trend, we assume it must be the correct course of action. This principle is especially powerful in situations of uncertainty. When people are unsure, they default to following the majority. This is why customer reviews, testimonials, and influencer endorsements are so effective. It is why nightclubs create long lines outside their doors, even when the venue is half empty inside. By making something appear popular or widely accepted, it becomes more persuasive. To use this principle, demonstrate that others already approve of what you are persuading someone to do. The more people that endorse it, the more persuasive it becomes. Authority. The power of expertise. People are far more likely to be persuaded by those they perceive as experts or figures of authority. This is why credentials, uniforms, and official titles dramatically enhance persuasive impact. In a famous study, participants were willing to administer severe electric shocks to others simply because they were instructed to do so, by a scientist in a lab coat. Authority is one of the most potent tools in persuasion, as people instinctively defer to those they believe hold superior knowledge or power. To leverage authority, it is essential to establish credibility. This can be achieved through titles, reputation, association with prestigious institutions, and displays of confidence. Even subtle cues, such as wearing a suit or using technical jargon, can increase perceived authority. The stronger the perception of authority, the more easily one can persuade. 5. Liking. The power of connection. People are more likely to be persuaded by those they like and relate to. This is why personal charm, shared interests, and physical attractiveness enhance persuasion. Studies show that similarity plays a critical role. People tend to trust those who appear similar to them in background, values, or personality. Building rapport before attempting persuasion significantly increases effectiveness. Compliments, active listening, and finding common ground create a sense of bonding, which lowers resistance to influence in negotiations, social settings, and sales, establishing likability. First makes the entire persuasion process more seamless. 6. Scarcity. The power of FOMO, fear of missing out. The perception that something is limited or rare increases its value and desirability. This is why phrases like limited time offer and only a few left in stock drive urgency in purchasing decisions. Scarcity triggers loss aversion, making people more motivated to act to avoid missing out. To use this principle effectively, emphasize exclusivity, time limits, and uniqueness. When people believe an opportunity is rare or disappearing, they are far more likely to take action. Persuasion is not about coercion. It is about understanding how the brain makes decisions and aligning messages accordingly. By mastering the 6 principles of influence, one can shape behavior effortlessly. The art of persuasion is a science, and those who understand its mechanics hold the power to influence, inspire, and lead. Chapter 3. The Power of Perception. Perception is reality. This statement is not merely philosophical. It is a fundamental truth in the psychology of influence. People do not respond to objective facts. They respond to their interpretation of those facts. 2 individuals can witness the same event, yet their perceptions of it may be entirely different based on their prior experiences, biases, and emotional states. Understanding how perception is formed and manipulated is one of the most powerful tools of influence. If you can control perception, you can control behavior. The human brain does not passively record reality. It constructs it. Every decision we make, every emotion we feel, and every belief we hold is shaped by our mental filters. These filters are formed by our upbringing, culture, experiences, and subconscious biases. A person who has been repeatedly betrayed in the past may interpret a simple delay in response as a sign of dishonesty. Another person, raised in an environment of trust and stability, may view the same delay as completely insignificant. The event is the same, but the perception differs, because perception is not about what is, but about what it means to the observer. In this chapter, we will explore how perception shapes reality, the psychological mechanisms behind perception, and how mastering the art of perception management allows you to guide thoughts, emotions, and decisions with precision. The science of perception, how the brain constructs reality. Perception is not a direct reflection of the world. It is a filtered interpretation of sensory input. The brain is constantly bombarded with millions of bits of information every second. If it were to process all of this information at once, it would be completely overwhelmed. To prevent this, the brain uses cognitive shortcuts to focus on what it deems important, filtering out everything else. This filtering process determines what we notice, what we ignore, and how we interpret experiences. Consider the cocktail party effect. You can be in a crowded room full of conversations, yet if someone across the room says your name, your brain immediately picks it up. This happens because your mind has been trained to prioritize personally relevant information. Similarly, when you buy a new car, you suddenly notice that same model everywhere. It was always there, but your brain simply wasn't filtering it into your conscious awareness before. This selective filtering means that reality is subjective. People only see what they are conditioned to see. Skilled influencers use this fact to control the narrative, guiding attention towards certain details while distracting from others. If you can direct what someone focuses on, you can shape how they perceive reality. Framing, the art of controlling perception. Framing is the psychological principle that the way information is presented affects how it is perceived. The same situation can be viewed positively or negatively, depending on how it is framed. This is why politicians, marketers, and media outlets carefully craft their language to elicit specific reactions. Imagine you are in charge of promoting a medical treatment. Would people be more likely to accept it if you said, "It has a 90% survival rate," or if you said, "It has a 10% fatality rate"? Objectively, these statements are identical, but the emotional impact is vastly different. The first emphasizes survival, evoking optimism, while the second emphasizes death, evoking fear. Framing can also be used to reshape negative situations. A company facing a financial downturn can present it as a restructuring opportunity rather than a crisis. A politician who loses an election can frame it as a stepping stone for a future victory. The actual event does not change, only the perception of it does. But because perception drives human response, framing determines how people react. The halo effect. When one trait influences everything. The halo effect is a cognitive bias where one positive trait overpowers rational judgment, leading people to assume unrelated qualities about a person or thing. For example, an attractive individual is often assumed to be more intelligent, kind, and competent, even if there is no evidence supporting these assumptions. This is why first impressions are so powerful. Once a person perceives you in a certain way, that perception tends to influence everything else about you. If a job candidate walks into an interview exuding confidence and professionalism, the interviewer is more likely to assume they are competent even before reviewing their qualifications. If someone is introduced as a leading expert, their words will carry more weight, even if they are saying the same things as an unknown speaker. The halo effect can be engineered. If you want to be perceived as competent and influential, create an initial impression that radiates authority, credibility, and confidence. If you want a product to seem luxurious, associate it with high-end branding, sleek design, and celebrity endorsements. People will assume the quality matches the image, even if the actual substance is identical to a lower-priced alternative. Perception and social proof. The bandwagon effect. Perception is not formed in isolation. It is heavily influenced by the behavior and opinions of others. This is why social proof is one of the most powerful forces in shaping perception. If a restaurant is empty, people assume the food isn't good. If it has a long line outside, they assume it must be amazing. If a book is labeled one bestseller, people perceive it as high quality, even if they've never read a single page. What others believe shapes what we believe. Social proof can be used to engineer perception in several ways. High engagement numbers like shares, testimonials signal credibility. Celebrity endorsements transfer their perceived authority onto the product. Exclusivity and limited availability create the illusion of high demand. By manufacturing social proof, influencers can dictate how their audience perceives value, credibility, and desirability. Controlling the narrative. How to shape public perception. Narratives are the frameworks through which people interpret reality. Every major political movement, brand, and social cause is successful not because of facts alone, but because of the story they tell. The most influential people in history did not just present information, They crafted compelling narratives that framed events in ways that resonated emotionally with the masses. Apple does not just sell computers, it tells a story of innovation, creativity, and breaking the status quo. Political leaders do not just present policies, they build grand narratives about the future that inspire loyalty. Luxury brands do not just sell handbags, they sell a story of exclusivity, status, and belonging. To control perception, control the story. If you can define how people interpret an event, a product, or an idea, you can shape their emotional response and guide their behavior accordingly. Conclusion: the power of perception in influence. Perception is not a passive process. It is an active construction. The way people view the world is shaped by their mental filters, framing, biases, and social influences. A master of influence does not argue over objective facts. They shape how those facts are interpreted. By mastering framing, the halo effect, social proof, and narrative control, you gain the power to reshape how others see reality. And because people act based on their perceptions, controlling perception means controlling outcomes. Chapter 4: Emotional Triggers and the Power of Emotional Influence. Emotion is the most powerful force in human decision-making. While logic and reason have their place, it is emotion that truly drives behavior. Every purchase, every belief, every action stems from an emotional impulse that the rational mind later justifies. This is why marketing campaigns do not simply list facts, but instead create compelling stories that spark feelings. It is why great leaders do not just provide plans, but ignite passion in their followers. And it is why the most persuasive individuals do not argue with cold logic, but instead appeal to deep, primal emotions that override skepticism and resistance. To influence others effectively, one must understand which emotions govern decision-making and how to activate these emotional triggers with precision. Fear, desire, urgency, nostalgia, trust. These are not abstract concepts. They are psychological buttons that, when pressed correctly, can shape thoughts, guide actions, and even alter long-standing beliefs. Understanding the science of emotional influence allows one to craft messages that bypass rational objections and create an irresistible pull toward compliance, action, or belief. In this chapter, we will explore the key emotional triggers that dictate behavior and how they can be used ethically and effectively in persuasion. The emotional brain: why we feel before we think. The human brain is not a logical machine. It is an emotional organ that occasionally thinks. Neuroscience has confirmed that decisions are made primarily in the limbic system, the brain's emotional core, before the prefrontal cortex, the rational part, steps in to rationalize the choice. This is why people often make decisions based on gut feelings and only later come up with logical reasons to support them. A person does not buy an expensive car because they need it. They buy it because it makes them feel powerful, successful, or admired. A voter does not choose a politician based solely on policies. They choose the one who makes them feel safe, inspired, or validated. This emotional first process is why storytelling is so persuasive. Facts alone do not move people, but stories filled with emotion, struggle, and triumph create deep connections that bypass logic. This is also why fear-based messaging is so effective. When someone is afraid, their rational thinking is overridden by an immediate, emotional response. The brain prioritizes survival over analysis, making fear one of the most potent triggers of influence. Since emotions drive action, the key to persuasion is understanding which emotions to trigger and when. Different emotional states create different psychological conditions that can either enhance or hinder influence. Let's explore some of the most powerful emotional triggers and how they can be strategically used to shape behavior. Fear, the ultimate motivator. Fear is the most primitive and powerful of all human emotions. It is a survival mechanism designed to keep us out of danger and as a result, it creates immediate urgency. When a person is afraid, their brain shuts down rational thinking and shifts into fight or flight mode. This is why fear-based marketing, political campaigns, and social movements are so effective. They tap into the brain's survival instincts, making rational counterarguments nearly impossible. Governments use fear to maintain order. Marketers use fear to sell solutions. Insurance companies use fear to highlight risks. Even parents use fear to shape behavior, warning their children of the dangers of bad decisions. Fear works because it forces people to act quickly, to buy, comply, or change behavior before it's too late. However, fear must be used carefully. If fear is too intense, it leads to paralysis, a state where the individual is so overwhelmed that they do nothing. The most effective use of fear is to present a clear threat, followed immediately by a solution that provides relief. This is why health campaigns show graphic images of smoking-related illnesses, but also provide a way out: quitting smoking. Fear alone is not enough. It must be paired with a path forward. Desire and aspiration, the pull toward pleasure. While fear pushes people away from danger, desire pulls them toward pleasure. Humans are not just survival-oriented. They are also reward-seeking creatures who are constantly pursuing greater comfort, status, and fulfillment. This is why people are drawn to luxury brands, celebrity lifestyles, and exclusive opportunities. They symbolize the fulfillment of a deep emotional desire for status, acceptance, or superiority. Desire-based persuasion works by creating a vision of an ideal future, one where the audience is happier, wealthier, more attractive, or more successful. Advertisements that show people driving luxurious cars, living in lavish homes, or achieving fitness goals tap into aspirational emotions, compelling the audience to reach for something greater. The most effective way to leverage desire is through contrast, showing the gap between where someone is now and where they could be. This gap creates an emotional pull that drives action. The more vivid the contrast, the stronger the emotional reaction. Trust and authority, the comfort of certainty. Trust is the foundation of persuasion. No matter how compelling a message is, if the audience does not trust the source, they will reject it. Trust is built through credibility, consistency, and relatability. A person is more likely to believe a familiar source than a stranger, which is why brands invest in long-term relationships with their customers, and why politicians and influencers work tirelessly to establish themselves as reliable figures. Authority enhances trust by adding credibility. When an expert in a white lab coat recommends a product, people assume it must be reliable. When a financial advisor with a long history of success offers advice, people follow it. Authority triggers a psychological shortcut. Instead of thinking critically, people defer to the perceived expert. To use trust and authority effectively, it is essential to establish credibility before making a request. The moment doubt enters the equation, persuasion collapses. This is why professionals emphasize credentials, social proof, and endorsements. They create a foundation of trust that strengthens influence. Urgency and scarcity, the fear of missing out, FOMO. One of the most powerful emotional triggers is urgency. The idea that if action is not taken immediately, an opportunity will be lost. This works because of loss aversion, a psychological principle stating that people are more motivated by the fear of losing something than by the prospect of gaining something. Limited time offers, flash sales, and exclusive memberships all capitalize on this principle. When something is scarce or time-sensitive, it becomes more desirable. This is why tickets to exclusive events sell out quickly, and why investors rush to buy stocks when they believe an opportunity is about to disappear. Urgency must be authentic. If people feel they are being manipulated, they resist. The key is to create a real sense of exclusivity and limited availability. making the audience feel they must act now or regret it later. Emotion is the true language of persuasion. While logic provides structure, it is emotion that drives action. By mastering fear, desire, trust, urgency, and social influence, one can shape behavior effortlessly. The ability to trigger the right emotion at the right time is what separates mere persuasion from true influence. Chapter 5. Subconscious Influence: The Hidden Forces That Shape Decision-Making. The most powerful influences are the ones we don't even notice. While we like to believe that we are rational beings who make deliberate, logical choices, the reality is far more complex. Most of our decisions are made automatically, beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. Every time we choose a product, trust a person, or feel drawn to a particular idea, we are often responding to hidden psychological cues rather than logical reasoning. This invisible layer of influence, known as subconscious persuasion, is the foundation of true influence. If you can tap into the subconscious mind, you can shape people's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without them realizing they are being influenced. Politicians, marketers, salespeople, and even social manipulators understand this concept deeply. They don't just tell people what to think. They create environments, experiences, and associations that guide thinking automatically. In this chapter, we will uncover the mechanisms of subconscious influence, how hidden triggers shape human behavior, and how understanding these forces allows you to master the game of influence at the deepest level. The subconscious mind, the hidden operating system. The subconscious mind is not just a passive part of our brain. It is the driving force behind nearly all behavior. It processes over 95% of our thoughts automatically, handling everything from breathing and walking to interpreting social cues and making snap judgments. It does this through deeply ingrained mental patterns built from experience, repetition, and instinct. Consider first impressions. Within milliseconds of meeting someone, your subconscious analyzes their face, posture, tone, and microexpressions, forming an instant judgment before you even have time to think. You may sense that someone is trustworthy or suspicious, competent or incompetent, likable or repelling, all without knowing exactly why. This is because your subconscious is matching what it sees against a vast internal database of past experiences, cultural conditioning, and evolutionary instincts. Similarly, when you walk into a store and feel drawn to a specific brand, your subconscious has already been influenced by thousands of unseen signals: color psychology, scent marketing, background music, and product placement. You are not making a rational choice. You are responding to carefully designed stimuli that activate hidden preferences and emotions. The key to subconscious influence is understanding that people don't need to be aware of a stimulus for it to shape their behavior. In fact, the more subtle the influence, the more powerful it is, because the conscious mind does not resist what it does not notice. Priming, the science of planting thoughts. Priming is one of the most subtle yet powerful techniques in subconscious influence. It occurs when exposure to a certain stimulus influences a person's response without their awareness. This can happen through words, images, sounds, or even body language. In a famous experiment, researchers had participants fill in missing letters for a series of words. Some were primed with words related to aging, such as wrinkle and gray, while others were given neutral words. The result? Those primed with aging-related words walked more slowly when leaving the room, even though they had no idea their behavior had been influenced. Priming works because the brain connects ideas automatically. If you subtly introduce certain themes, people will begin thinking in that direction without realizing it. This is why politicians repeat key phrases over and over: hope, security, change, fear, until they become embedded in the public's subconscious. It's also why companies carefully choose brand colors and taglines, because even the slightest association can prime consumers toward trust, excitement, or urgency. Want to make someone feel more powerful? Place them in a high-backed chair and give them a heavy clipboard. Studies show these subconscious cues enhance feelings of authority. Want someone to perceive a product as luxurious? Present it on a velvet cloth with soft lighting and classical music in the background. The brain associates sensory cues with past experiences, shaping perceptions without conscious thought. The most successful influencers do not just speak to people's conscious minds. They prime their subconscious first, guiding their thoughts in a specific direction before any decision is made. Anchoring, the first impression that sticks. Anchoring is the psychological phenomenon where the first piece of information we encounter sets the stage for everything that follows. Our brains are wired to rely on the first number, fact, or idea we hear, even when making unrelated decisions. For example, if a real estate agent shows you a high-priced house first, every house you see afterward will seem like a bargain, even if the second house is still expensive. If a salesperson mentions a luxury model first, the mid-range model will feel like a great deal, even if it's more than you originally intended to spend. This principle is used everywhere. Retail pricing. The original price is shown crossed out, making the sale price seem like an irresistible deal. Salary negotiations. The first person to name a number sets the mental anchor, influencing the entire negotiation. Political debates. The first person to frame an issue often defines how people perceive it moving forward. Anchoring works because the subconscious fixates on the first piece of data it receives and compares everything else to it. This is why controlling the starting point of any discussion or decision-making process is one of the most effective ways to shape perceptions. The mere exposure effect. Familiarity breeds trust. People are naturally drawn to what they recognize. The mere exposure effect is the psychological principle that the more we see something, the more we like and trust it, even if we don't consciously remember seeing it before. This is why politicians flood airwaves with their names and faces, not necessarily to persuade, but simply to become familiar. By the time voting day arrives, people will subconsciously gravitate toward the most familiar option, even if they don't recall why. It's also why brands repeat their logos, slogans, and jingles endlessly, because over time, our subconscious associates familiarity with credibility. Repetition works in persuasion because the subconscious does not distinguish between repeated exposure and actual experience. If something feels familiar, the brain assumes it must be true, safe, and reliable. This is why repeating your key message multiple times in any conversation, speech, or advertisement is essential. Because even if people don't consciously remember your words, their subconscious will. Subconscious influence is the true power behind persuasion. The conscious mind may resist arguments, but the subconscious mind is always absorbing information, forming patterns, and shaping decisions without awareness. The most successful influencers are those who understand how to prime thoughts, anchor perceptions, create familiarity, and use hidden triggers to guide behavior effortlessly. Chapter 6. Social Conditioning. How Society Programs Our Beliefs and Behaviors. From the moment we are born, we are not just individuals. We are products of our environment. Our thoughts, desires, fears, and even our sense of morality are not entirely our own. Instead, they are shaped, reinforced, and programmed by the society around us. We are born into a world that already has rules, expectations, hierarchies, and narratives. And through a process known as social conditioning, we internalize them, often without question. Social conditioning is the invisible hand that molds human behavior. It determines what we perceive as right or wrong, beautiful or ugly, possible or impossible. It tells us what to value, what to fear, what to aspire to, and even what to ignore. This conditioning does not come from a single source. but from an intricate network of family, education, media, culture, government, and peer groups, each reinforcing a version of reality designed to maintain order, power structures, and societal cohesion. To master the game of influence, one must understand how social conditioning works, how it shapes identity, and, most importantly, how to use, resist, or reshape it to control perception and behavior. In this chapter, we will uncover the psychological mechanisms of social conditioning, how beliefs are implanted and reinforced, and how those who control the dominant narratives shape entire populations. The hidden framework, how we internalize social norms. Human beings do not operate in a vacuum. From infancy, our brains are wired to observe, absorb, and conform to the environment around us. This is because survival depends on belonging to a group. In prehistoric times, being part of a tribe meant protection, resources, and survival, while being an outsider often meant death. This primal instinct still governs us today. We crave acceptance and fear rejection because our subconscious mind equates social exclusion with danger. The process of social conditioning begins before we even learn to speak. As children, we mimic the behaviors, expressions, and values of those around us. We quickly learn what brings praise and approval and what results in punishment and shame. These early experiences create deep-seated mental associations, shaping how we see the world. If a child is rewarded for being quiet and obedient, they learn that conformity leads to approval. If they are punished for questioning authority, they internalize that compliance is safer than independent thought. As we grow, these early lessons are reinforced by schools, religion, media, and social institutions. We are taught what is acceptable, what is deviant, what is success, and what is failure. By the time we reach adulthood, most of our core beliefs and behaviors are not consciously chosen. They are inherited from the society we were raised in. But who decides what is normal? Who sets the standards of right and wrong, success and failure, intelligence and ignorance? To truly influence others, one must look at who controls the systems of social conditioning and how they use them to shape perception and behavior. The architects of perception. Who controls social conditioning? Social conditioning is not accidental. It is a tool of power, designed to keep societies functioning in a way that benefits those in control. Throughout history, the ruling class, political leaders, religious institutions, and economic elites have crafted social norms to maintain order, compliance, and dominance. 1. Governments and laws. The most obvious form of social conditioning comes from laws and policies. Governments dictate morality by defining what is legal and illegal, shaping people's sense of justice, responsibility, and obedience. A government that wants a docile population will punish dissent and reward compliance. One that wants a militarized culture will glorify strength, discipline, and nationalism. Laws are not just about order, they are about shaping collective psychology. 2. Education systems. Schools are one of the most powerful tools for instilling values, worldviews, and social expectations. They do not just teach facts, they teach how to think, what to question, and what to accept as truth. A society that wants obedient workers will design an education system that prioritizes memorization over critical thinking, authority over autonomy, and standardized performance over creativity. The way a society educates its children determines the kind of adults it produces. 3. Media and entertainment. The most effective propaganda is the kind people willingly consume. Television, movies, music, and social media are more than entertainment. They are vehicles of cultural programming. They define beauty standards, relationship dynamics, career aspirations, and even political ideologies. When certain behaviors are glorified in media, wealth, power, hyper-individualism, and others are ridiculed or ignored, intellectualism, collectivism, emotional depth. It subtly conditions society's values. 4. Religion and morality. Religious institutions have historically played a central role in moral conditioning, defining what is virtuous, what is sinful, and what is sacred. Whether one subscribes to religious beliefs or not, moral frameworks embedded in culture often originate from religious teachings, dictating how people should behave, whom they should trust, and what they should aspire to. 5. Social circles and peer pressure. Perhaps the most immediate and personal form of conditioning comes from family, friends, and peers. Humans are deeply influenced by those they spend the most time with. If a behavior is accepted by the group, individuals will adopt it, even if it contradicts personal logic or morality. This is why social movements can rapidly change norms, and why cultures with strong social cohesion maintain traditional values for centuries. The common thread among all these forces is that people rarely question what they have been raised to believe, and that is where the true power of social conditioning lies. It does not need to be enforced when people willingly enforce it upon themselves. Breaking free. How to decondition the mind. While social conditioning is an essential part of human society, it can also be a form of mental imprisonment. Many people live their entire lives following scripts they did not write, pursuing goals they did not choose, and fearing consequences that only exist because they were taught to fear them. To master influence at the highest level, one must first break free from their own conditioning and learn to rewrite their own beliefs. Here's how. 1. Question everything you were taught. The first step to mental liberation is skepticism. Every belief you hold, every truth you accept. Where did it come from? Who benefits from you believing it? The most powerful minds are those that have learned to see beyond their conditioning and reconstruct their own philosophy. 2. Recognize the influence of media and culture. Every time you consume information, ask, what message is being implanted? What emotional response is being triggered? Who gains power by making me think this way? The ability to see through the conditioning allows you to take control of your own perceptions. 3. Surround yourself with contrasting perspectives. If everyone around you thinks the same way, you are living in an echo chamber. Expose yourself to diverse viewpoints, alternative ideas, and opposing cultures. The more perspectives you encounter, the less hold any single conditioning system will have over you. 4. Reprogram yourself with intentional conditioning. If social conditioning is unavoidable, why not consciously control it? Choose what you consume, who you associate with, and what ideas you reinforce. You can condition yourself for success, resilience, and power if you take control of your own mental programming. Social conditioning is the hidden force shaping human behavior, but those who understand it become the architects of influence rather than the subjects of it. By learning to recognize, resist, and reshape social conditioning, you can influence others at the deepest level without them even realizing it. Chapter 7. Framing and Perception Control. How to shape reality. Through strategic messaging, perception is not an objective experience. It is a malleable construct shaped by the way information is presented. The human mind does not process raw reality. It interprets reality through layers of context, bias, and cognitive shortcuts. What we believe, how we feel, and the choices we make are often determined not by the facts themselves, but by how those facts are framed. Framing is the art of crafting the lens through which information is viewed, strategically emphasizing certain aspects while diminishing others to guide perception in a desired direction. It is not merely about communication. It is about control. The power of framing has been harnessed by leaders, marketers, politicians, and media organizations for centuries, not through deception, but through selection, choosing which truths to highlight, which elements to suppress, and how to package reality in a way that makes it appear self-evident. Understanding framing means recognizing that people do not passively absorb information. They interpret it through cognitive filters that are deeply influenced by context and emotional priming. A single piece of information can evoke entirely different reactions depending on how it is introduced. Take, for example, the difference between saying a medical procedure has a 90% survival rate versus a 10% mortality rate. Both statements describe the same probability, yet they elicit entirely different psychological responses. The first emphasizes safety and optimism. The second, risk and danger. The mind gravitates toward associations, often bypassing logical reasoning in favor of emotional intuition. This is why a well-framed message can shape public opinion, guide decision-making, and influence behavior with remarkable precision. Framing is not manipulation in the sinister sense. It is simply an understanding of the rules by which perception is constructed. Those who ignore these principles become vulnerable to those who use them with intent. Every major societal debate, from politics to business to personal relationships, is not merely a conflict of ideas, but a battle of frames, where the one who defines the context wins the argument before it even begins. If you can frame the debate, you control the range of acceptable conclusions. By mastering framing, you can shape how others interpret reality itself. The subtle art of contrast, shaping perception through comparison. Human cognition is contrast-driven. We rarely evaluate things in isolation. Instead, we compare them to alternatives, and it is this relative positioning that determines our perception. This is why sales strategies often present multiple versions of a product, not merely to offer variety, but to influence purchasing decisions. A restaurant menu, for instance, may include an extremely expensive wine option, not because they expect many customers to order it, but because its presence makes the next highest option seem more reasonable by comparison. This principle extends far beyond pricing. It is a fundamental mechanism of perception itself. Consider political debates. Instead of convincing people of a candidate's strengths, strategists often focus on framing their opponent as a catastrophic alternative. The goal is not to present an ideal choice, but to establish a contrast that makes one option feel safer, even if it is imperfect. This technique is called negative framing and is used extensively in advertising, public relations, and personal influence. People are more likely to accept a given proposition if the alternative is framed as significantly worse. This is why crisis managers and corporations do not attempt to erase scandals, but instead work to reframe them in a way that shifts the public's focus towards something even more unpalatable. Contrast framing also plays a key role in negotiations. If a job applicant demands an exorbitant salary before settling for a slightly lower figure, the final number appears more reasonable than if it had been suggested outright. Similarly, if a salesperson presents a high-priced item before introducing a cheaper one, the second item will feel like a bargain by comparison. The sequence in which choices are presented is rarely arbitrary. It is a calculated effort to guide perception by controlling what something is compared to. The language of influence, how words shape interpretation. Words are not merely vessels for information. They carry emotional weight, shaping how messages are received and interpreted. This is why two sentences that express the same factual information can have dramatically different effects depending on word choice. Consider the difference between the phrases tax relief and tax cut. While both imply a reduction in taxation, the former suggests that taxes are an inherent burden from which relief is necessary, while the latter is more neutral. The framing of a single term can subtly shape public attitudes and policy debates. This is particularly evident in political rhetoric. Consider the difference between calling an action a military intervention versus an invasion, or describing a movement as a grassroots uprising versus a mob. Each phrase carries embedded associations that prime audiences to interpret the event in a certain way. By selecting words that align with the desired emotional response, skilled communicators can shape perception without altering the underlying facts. The same principle applies in marketing, where words like exclusive, limited time offer, and elite access create a perception of scarcity and value, compelling consumers to act with urgency. Reframing adversity, turning weakness into strength. One of the most valuable applications of framing is the ability to reframe negative situations in a way that neutralizes their impact or even turns them into advantages. In public relations, this is known as crisis framing, the strategic redirection of focus from a damaging issue toward a more favorable narrative. A politician caught in a scandal may frame it as a moment of growth, emphasizing lessons learned rather than mistakes made. A business facing backlash for a failed product may reframe the situation as an innovation test that provides valuable market insights. The key is to shift perception away from failure and toward progress, emphasizing resilience, adaptation, and future success. On an individual level, reframing is a powerful tool for confidence and self-presentation. A job candidate lacking direct experience in an industry may reframe this as a strength, positioning themselves as bringing a fresh perspective. A public speaker experiencing nerves can reframe the sensation as excitement, harnessing the same physiological response in a way that enhances their delivery. The ability to control how a situation is framed determines whether it is perceived as a setback or an opportunity. Framing is not about distortion. It is about interpretation. Reality itself does not change, but our perception of it does. And that perception dictates our reactions, emotions, and decisions. Those who master the art of framing gain the ability to control narratives, shape conversations, and guide others toward desired conclusions without force or coercion. It is a skill used by politicians to sway elections, by marketers to drive sales, by leaders to inspire, and by individuals to navigate social dynamics with greater influence. In the next chapter, we will explore the concept of authority and credibility, how perceived expertise commands influence, understanding how status, credentials, and social proof affect perception will provide deeper insight into why people obey, trust, and follow certain figures without question. The ability to project authority is one of the most powerful levers of influence, and those who wield it effectively can command attention, loyalty, and compliance with minimal resistance. Chapter 8. The Power of Authority and Credibility. How perceived expertise commands influence. Authority is one of the most potent forces shaping human behavior. From childhood, we are conditioned to obey figures of authority: parents, teachers, law enforcement, government officials, without question. This ingrained tendency extends into adulthood, influencing how we interact with experts, leaders, and even brands. The mere perception of authority can compel obedience, even when logic or morality would suggest resistance. This is why those who can project authority, whether through expertise, confidence, or symbolic markers of status, hold immense power over others. Psychologist Stanley Milgram's famous obedience experiments demonstrated this principle in stark terms. Participants were instructed to administer what they believed were painful electric shocks to another person. Despite their visible discomfort, most continued to obey the experimenter's commands, simply because he wore a lab coat and spoke with confidence. No threats were issued. No force was applied. The illusion of expertise was enough to override personal conscience. This experiment revealed an uncomfortable truth. People will often follow perceived authority figures blindly, even when doing so conflicts with their own values. Understanding the psychology of authority is crucial for anyone seeking to wield influence. Whether you aim to establish yourself as a leader, persuade an audience, or gain credibility in your field, the ability to project expertise and command respect is invaluable. However, True authority is not merely about titles or superficial displays of power. It is about constructing an aura of legitimacy that compels others to listen, trust, and follow. In this chapter, we will explore the mechanisms of authority, the psychological triggers that enhance credibility, and the strategic methods for establishing yourself as a trusted and influential figure. The markers of authority. Symbols, status, and social proof. Authority is often signaled through external markers, symbols that instantly convey expertise or legitimacy. Uniforms, degrees, certifications, and titles will all serve as shorthand indicators of authority. A doctor in a white coat, a judge in a robe, a military officer in uniform. Each of these individuals commands respect, not because of who they are as individuals, but because of the roles they represent. These symbols create an automatic association with competence, discipline, and expertise. Businesses and brands also leverage these symbols to enhance credibility. A product endorsed by leading scientists or a book labeled a New York Times bestseller instantly gains perceived legitimacy. The effectiveness of this strategy is not based on actual quality, but on the psychological shortcut that tells us, if experts endorse this, it must be good. The same principle applies to online influence. Having a large following, verified social media status, or testimonials from respected individuals can create an aura of authority that makes others more likely to trust and follow. However, authority is not just about external symbols. It is reinforced by the way one speaks, acts, and carries themselves. A person who exudes confidence, speaks with certainty, and displays mastery over a subject is far more likely to be perceived as an authority than someone who hesitates, wavers, or appears unsure. This is why confidence, whether real or carefully cultivated, is one of the most powerful tools for establishing credibility. The voice of authority. How confidence and certainty shape perception. People tend to equate certainty with expertise. A person who states their opinion with unwavering confidence is more likely to be believed than someone who hedges their statements with uncertainty. This is why political leaders, business executives, and media personalities often speak in absolutes. They understand that conviction creates credibility. Even when they are wrong, their confidence makes them persuasive. This psychological bias can be exploited in both positive and negative ways. On one hand, genuine experts who communicate their knowledge with confidence can inspire trust and drive positive action. On the other hand, con artists, cult leaders, and misinformation peddlers use the same principle to manipulate audiences. They do not necessarily possess real expertise, but their ability to project certainty makes them appear authoritative. To establish yourself as an authority, you must develop the ability to speak with clarity and decisiveness. This does not mean pretending to know things you do not, but rather framing your knowledge in a way that conveys competence. When answering questions, avoid weak language like "I think" or "I'm not sure." Instead, present your statements in a way that reinforces confidence. Based on my experience, the best approach is, or the evidence strongly supports. This subtle shift in language can dramatically enhance how others perceive your expertise. Social proof and authority. The power of consensus. One of the most powerful reinforcements of authority is social proof. The idea that people look to others for validation of what is credible or valuable. If a restaurant has a long line, we assume the food must be good. If a book has thousands of 5-star reviews, we assume it must be worth reading. If a speaker has a large, engaged audience, we assume they must be worth listening to. Social proof is a psychological shortcut that helps us determine who and what to trust. Influencers and thought leaders often use this principle to build credibility. They highlight testimonials, showcase media appearances, and leverage endorsements from respected figures. This is not just self-promotion. It is a strategic way to create an aura of legitimacy. The more people perceive that others trust and respect you, the more they will trust and respect you as well. This principle also explains why authority figures who fall from grace often lose credibility rapidly. If the public turns against a leader, their authority erodes because the consensus has shifted. This is why maintaining social proof is critical for sustaining influence. It is not enough to establish authority. It must be continually reinforced through ongoing validation. Building your own authority. Strategies for establishing credibility. Becoming an authority in any field requires a combination of knowledge, confidence, and strategic positioning. The first step is to develop genuine expertise. There is no substitute for mastery. However, expertise alone is not enough. You must also position yourself as someone worth listening to. This means actively demonstrating your knowledge through content, thought leadership, and public engagement. Writing articles, speaking at events, appearing in media interviews, and providing insightful commentary in your area of expertise all contribute to building an authoritative presence. However, simply sharing information is not enough. You must frame yourself as a leader in your field. Use authoritative language, highlight your credentials and achievements, and associate yourself with other respected figures. The goal is to create a perception of legitimacy that makes others instinctively trust your insights. Another key strategy is to leverage borrowed authority. Associating yourself with well-established experts, institutions, or brands can enhance your own credibility by extension. This is why people seek degrees from prestigious universities, endorsements from industry leaders, and collaborations with influential figures. The association itself serves as a signal of credibility, making it easier to establish authority without having to prove yourself from scratch. Authority is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. People are naturally inclined to follow those they perceive as experts, leaders, or trusted figures. By understanding the mechanisms of authority, confidence, symbols, social proof, and strategic positioning, you can establish yourself as a credible and influential presence in any domain. However, with great influence comes responsibility. Authority can be used to educate, inspire, and lead, but it can also be abused to manipulate and deceive. Ethical authority is built on genuine expertise, integrity, and a commitment to truth. Those who wield authority wisely can shape industries, influence movements, and drive meaningful change. Those who exploit it recklessly may find that trust, once lost, is nearly impossible to regain. Chapter 9. The Psychology of Persuasion. Subtle Cues that drive decision-making. Persuasion is not a battle of logic, nor is it merely a matter of presenting facts. It is a dance of emotions, subconscious biases, and carefully crafted narratives that shape human decision-making. People believe they make rational choices, weighing pros and cons objectively. But in reality, their choices are often determined by factors they are unaware of: small cues, emotional triggers, and psychological tendencies that influence their perception and behavior. Those who understand these mechanisms can subtly guide others toward desired conclusions without resistance, making persuasion one of the most powerful tools of influence. From salespeople closing multi-million-dollar deals to politicians shaping public opinion, the art of persuasion operates on principles that have remained consistent throughout human history. It is not about coercion or manipulation, but about presenting information in a way that aligns with the recipient's values, emotions, and mental shortcuts. A persuasive argument does not force compliance. It creates the illusion of free choice while leading the audience to an inevitable decision. The more effortlessly a message resonates with an individual's internal beliefs and psychological framework, the more effective it becomes. In this chapter, we will explore the psychological principles that make persuasion work, how emotions override logic, how people process information based on biases rather than facts, and how the smallest cues can have a profound impact on decision-making. By mastering these techniques, you will gain the ability to shape conversations, influence negotiations, and craft messages that compel action. The role of emotion in decision-making. Why feelings override logic. At the core of every persuasive message lies an emotional appeal. While people like to believe they make decisions rationally, the truth is that emotions drive most choices, with logic serving as a post-rationalization tool to justify those decisions. Studies in neuroscience reveal that when individuals suffer damage to the parts of the brain responsible for processing emotions, they struggle to make even the simplest decisions. Without emotional input, the human mind becomes paralyzed by indecision, unable to weigh the significance of different choices. This is why the most persuasive arguments are not purely intellectual. They tap into deeply held emotions such as fear, hope, desire, or belonging. Advertisers, for example, do not merely present product specifications. They sell lifestyles, aspirations, and solutions to emotional pain points. A car commercial does not focus on the engine's horsepower alone. It shows a family creating memories on a scenic road trip, or a successful executive arriving at an important meeting, reinforcing the underlying emotions associated with status, security, and adventure. Politicians employ the same strategy. They do not merely list policies. They craft narratives that stir emotions. A campaign speech that warns of impending economic collapse creates fear, making the audience more receptive to bold leadership. A speech that tells a story of a struggling family overcoming adversity instills hope, creating an emotional connection that makes the candidate seem more relatable and trustworthy. Whether in marketing, leadership, or personal interactions, the ability to harness emotions in persuasion is the key to influence. Cognitive biases. The invisible forces that shape perception. People do not evaluate information objectively. They interpret it through a lens of biases that shape their understanding of the world. These cognitive biases act as mental shortcuts, helping individuals process complex information quickly, but also making them susceptible to influence. Understanding these biases allows persuaders to craft messages that align with how people naturally think and react. One of the most powerful biases is confirmation bias, the tendency for people to favor information that confirms their existing beliefs while dismissing contradictory evidence. This is why debates rarely change minds. Individuals filter information through their own ideological perspectives, reinforcing their preconceptions rather than challenging them. Effective persuaders do not fight confirmation bias head-on. They work with it, framing their arguments in a way that aligns with the audience's existing worldview rather than opposing it. Another critical bias is the anchoring effect, where people rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive when making decisions. If a customer sees a high price before a discount is introduced, the sale price seems more attractive than if they had only seen the lower price initially. Negotiators use this principle by making an extreme initial demand before conceding to a more reasonable request, making the final deal appear fair in comparison. The order in which information is presented dramatically affects how it is perceived. The scarcity effect is another powerful tool of persuasion. When people believe something is rare or in limited supply, they value it more. This is why limited time offers, exclusive memberships, and phrases like "only a few spots left" are so effective in marketing. Scarcity triggers a psychological fear of missing out, compelling individuals to act quickly before an opportunity disappears. This principle applies not only in sales, but also in social influence. Those who position themselves as selective, hard to access, or in high demand often command greater respect and desirability. The power of storytelling, engaging the subconscious mind. Facts may inform, but stories persuade. The human brain is wired for narrative. We remember information more effectively when it is embedded in a compelling story than when it is presented as raw data. Stories activate multiple areas of the brain, engaging emotions, creating vivid mental imagery, and fostering a sense of connection between the storyteller and the audience. This is why the most persuasive messages are not lists of reasons, but narratives that transport the listener into a world where they can see themselves in the scenario being presented. A well-crafted story bypasses skepticism by engaging the subconscious mind. Instead of telling someone why a particular diet plan works, a persuasive speaker might share a personal transformation story of someone who struggled with weight loss, found a breakthrough, and achieved a healthier lifestyle. Instead of arguing about the dangers of climate change with statistics, an environmental activist might tell the story of a small coastal town gradually disappearing under rising sea levels, making the issue feel real and immediate. The key to effective storytelling and persuasion is relatability and emotional engagement. The audience must see themselves in the narrative, experiencing the emotions of the protagonist as if they were their own. The more vivid the imagery, the more immersive the experience, and the more deeply the message is internalized. Framing and linguistic triggers. Crafting the perception of truth. The way information is framed can change how it is perceived, even if the underlying facts remain the same. This is why news headlines, political speeches, and advertising slogans carefully craft their wording to evoke specific emotional and cognitive responses. A job cuts announcement sounds negative, but if framed as a corporate restructuring for efficiency, it appears strategic. A global warming crisis may induce panic, while climate adaptation strategies suggest proactive solutions. Language shapes reality because people associate different words with different emotional connotations. The principle of priming suggests that the words we encounter influence our subconscious thoughts and behaviors. If a study participant reads words related to aggression before entering a discussion, they are more likely to act confrontationally than someone primed with words related to cooperation. Persuasive communicators understand how to subtly prime their audience by embedding specific linguistic cues that align with the desired response. Persuasion is not about forcing agreement. It is about guiding perception in a way that makes the desired conclusion feel natural and inevitable. It is a blend of emotional appeal, cognitive bias manipulation, strategic storytelling, and precise framing, all working together to shape human behavior. The most influential figures throughout history have understood these principles intuitively, using them to rally movements, sell ideas, and shape entire societies. To master persuasion, one must practice these techniques deliberately, observing how people respond, refining messaging, and adapting to different audiences. The ability to persuade is not just a skill for leaders and marketers. It is a fundamental life tool that can enhance relationships, negotiations, and personal success. Those who understand the psychology of persuasion hold the keys to influence, capable of shaping decisions in ways that others scarcely recognize. Chapter 10. The Psychology of Trust and Reciprocity. How to build loyalty and lasting influence. Trust is the foundation of influence. Without it, persuasion is temporary, authority is questioned, and relationships, whether personal, professional, or societal, crumble under suspicion. Trust is not given freely. It must be earned, reinforced, and protected. It is a fragile yet powerful force, capable of amplifying influence exponentially when cultivated correctly. In the absence of trust, even the most persuasive techniques fail, as people instinctively resist manipulation or doubt intentions. At the heart of trust lies reciprocity, the subconscious human tendency to return favors, kindness, and goodwill. The principle of reciprocity is one of the most powerful drivers of human behavior, dictating not only social interactions, but also business strategies, leadership effectiveness, and long-term influence. When someone does something for us, we feel an innate obligation to return the gesture. This fundamental rule of social exchange has been embedded in human culture for millennia, forming the basis of cooperation, alliances, and enduring relationships. In this chapter, we will explore the intricate psychology behind trust and reciprocity, how they function, how they can be strategically nurtured, and how they serve as the key to long-term influence. Whether you seek to strengthen business relationships, build a devoted audience, or establish credibility in your field, understanding the mechanisms of trust and reciprocity will position you as an indispensable figure in any domain. The science of trust. Why people believe in some and doubt others. Trust is not built solely on logic. It is deeply rooted in emotions and subconscious perceptions. Neuroscientific studies reveal that when we trust someone, our brains release oxytocin, a neurochemical that promotes bonding, reduces fear, and enhances cooperative behavior. This same chemical is released when we experience love, friendship, or even simple acts of kindness, reinforcing the idea that trust is biologically hardwired into human interactions. However, trust is not granted indiscriminately. People assess trustworthiness based on three key factors: competence, integrity, and benevolence. Competence ensures that an individual or organization can deliver on promises. Integrity reassures that they will act honestly and ethically. Benevolence ensures that their actions are guided by genuine care rather than self-serving motives. When any of these elements are absent, trust erodes and skepticism takes its place. Consider the world of business. Consumers trust brands that consistently deliver high-quality products, competence, uphold ethical values, integrity, and prioritize customer well-being over pure profit, benevolence. The same applies to leadership. Employees trust leaders who demonstrate expertise, transparency, and a genuine concern for their team's welfare. Those who violate these pillars of trust, whether through deception, inconsistency, or selfishness, face irreparable reputational damage. The power of reciprocity. Why giving first creates influence. Reciprocity is one of the strongest forces driving human interactions. When someone does us a favor, we feel compelled, almost obligated, to return the gesture. This principle is so deeply ingrained that it functions even when the original giver expects nothing in return. The simple act of giving, whether tangible or intangible, creates an invisible debt that influences behavior. Marketers, negotiators, and leaders strategically harness reciprocity to build lasting influence. Consider the classic example of the free sample effect. When people receive something for free, they are far more likely to make a purchase, even if they had no initial intention to do so. This is why high-end cosmetics brands offer free trials, why charities send small gifts with donation requests, and why professionals freely share valuable insights before pitching their services. The act of giving activates the reciprocity principle, making the recipient more inclined to return the favor. Beyond business, reciprocity shapes personal and professional relationships. Leaders who invest in their employees through mentorship, recognition, and opportunities earn loyalty in return. People who show kindness, generosity, and thoughtfulness naturally attract goodwill, deepening relationships and expanding their sphere of influence. The key is giving without expectation. A genuine gesture of goodwill carries more power than one that transparently demands repayment. Building trust. Through consistency and authenticity. Trust is not established overnight. It is cultivated through consistency. The human brain is wired to seek patterns. When someone behaves reliably over time, we categorize them as trustworthy. Conversely, inconsistency breeds doubt, making us question motives and reliability. This is why brands invest heavily in maintaining consistent messaging, customer experience, and product quality. A brand that fluctuates in reliability loses consumer trust quickly. The same applies to personal credibility. People trust individuals who consistently align their words with their actions, reinforcing their integrity through repeated behavior. Authenticity is another crucial factor in trust building. People can detect insincerity almost instinctively. Attempts to manipulate or feign concern are often met with resistance. The key to authenticity is alignment, when your values, actions, and communication all reflect a unified and honest intention. Trust follows naturally. Leaders who openly admit mistakes, brands that acknowledge shortcomings, and individuals who speak with transparency are far more likely to sustain trust over the long term. Repairing broken trust, the path to redemption. Once trust is broken, restoring it is one of the most challenging feats of influence. People have a natural negativity bias. One betrayal often outweighs a dozen positive experiences. However, trust can be repaired with the right approach. The first step in restoring trust is acknowledgement. Denying wrongdoing or making excuses only deepens distrust. A sincere admission of failure, paired with accountability, demonstrates integrity. The second step is visible corrective action. Words alone do not restore trust. Actions must reinforce a genuine commitment to change. The final step is consistency over time. Trust does not return instantly. It must be rebuilt through sustained reliability. Consider companies that experience PR crises. Those that issue empty apologies without concrete action often face prolonged consumer backlash. However, those that take decisive steps, whether through compensation, policy changes, or leadership shifts, gradually regain credibility. The same applies to personal relationships. Whether in friendships, business, or leadership, trust can only be restored through actions that repeatedly demonstrate sincerity and responsibility. The long-term power of trust-based influence. Influence built on manipulation is temporary. Influence built on trust is lasting. When people trust you, they do not need to be persuaded repeatedly. They willingly follow, support, and advocate on your behalf. A trusted individual or brand does not need to employ aggressive persuasion tactics because their reputation alone carries weight. This is why the most successful leaders, businesses, and influencers prioritize trust over short-term gains. Those who operate with integrity, consistency, and reciprocity create networks of loyalty that sustain influence over a lifetime. The best salespeople are not those who pressure customers into buying once, but those who build relationships that lead to repeat business and referrals. The best leaders are not those who demand obedience, but those who inspire commitment through trust. Understanding the psychology of trust and reciprocity allows you to cultivate influence that endures. By giving first, acting with integrity, and maintaining consistency, you create an ecosystem where others naturally seek your guidance, respect your expertise, and advocate on your behalf. Trust is the currency of influence. Invest in it wisely, and it will yield dividends far beyond any persuasive tactic alone. As we have explored in this chapter, trust and reciprocity form the bedrock of enduring influence. Without trust, persuasion is fleeting, and without reciprocity, relationships lack depth. Those who master these principles do not merely convince, they inspire, lead, and create movements that endure. Chapter 11. The Psychology of Social Proof and Conformity. Why people follow the crowd? Humans are inherently social creatures. From the earliest days of civilization, survival depended on being part of a group. Those who stood alone were more vulnerable to predators, starvation, and danger. This evolutionary reality has hardwired into our brains a deep-rooted instinct to look to others for guidance, validation, and decision-making cues. Whether we recognize it or not, much of our behavior is dictated not by independent thought, but by the influence of those around us. This is the foundation of social proof, the psychological phenomenon where people assume that the actions of others indicate the correct course of action. Social proof governs everything from the brands we trust to the choices we make in unfamiliar situations. It is why people check online reviews before purchasing a product, why nightclubs maintain long lines outside their doors to signal popularity, and why social media influencers hold tremendous sway over consumer behavior. The human brain, when faced with uncertainty, instinctively seeks reassurance from the collective. The larger the number of people endorsing an idea, the more credible it appears. In this chapter, we will explore the psychology behind social proof and conformity, how it influences behavior, why it can override logic, and how it can be leveraged to shape decisions, create mass movements, and establish authority. By understanding these principles, you can strategically position yourself, your brand, or your ideas in a way that compels people to follow without resistance. The science of social proof. Why we trust the crowd. The power of social proof is rooted in cognitive efficiency. The brain is constantly seeking shortcuts to avoid unnecessary effort. Evaluating every situation from scratch would be mentally exhausting. Instead, we rely on external cues, particularly the behavior of others, to guide our decisions. This phenomenon is especially pronounced in unfamiliar or ambiguous situations, where we lack personal experience to determine the best course of action. One of the most famous experiments demonstrating social proof is Solomon Asch's conformity study. In the 1950s, Asch showed groups of participants a series of lines and asked them to identify which line was the longest. The task was simple, and the correct answer was obvious. However, when placed in a group where others deliberately gave incorrect answers, most participants conformed to the wrong choice, even when it contradicted what they clearly saw. This experiment highlighted the immense pressure people feel to align with the group, even when the group is objectively incorrect. Social proof is so powerful that it can override individual logic, ethics, and personal preferences. It explains why fads take hold, why misinformation spreads rapidly, and why people imitate behaviors they see others engaging in, whether those behaviors are beneficial or harmful. The need to belong and be part of the in-group often outweighs rational analysis. The different forms of social proof. Social proof is not a single phenomenon. It manifests in various forms, each exerting influence in different ways. Understanding these variations allows you to harness them strategically. 1. Expert social proof. When an authority figure endorses something, people naturally trust it more. This is why brands hire doctors to promote health products, why TED speakers are perceived as thought leaders, and why academic credentials increase credibility. The assumption is that experts possess superior knowledge, making their endorsement more persuasive. 2. Celebrity social proof. People are drawn to status and influence. When a celebrity endorses a product, service, or idea, it gains social value simply by association. This is why major companies invest heavily in celebrity sponsorships. Fans subconsciously link their admiration for the celebrity to the endorsed product, making them more likely to adopt it. 3. User social proof. The most powerful social proof often comes from peers rather than authority figures. Customer testimonials, online reviews, and social media recommendations influence purchasing behavior more than traditional advertising. When people see others like themselves endorsing something, it feels authentic and relatable. 4. Crowd social proof. The larger the number of people engaging in a behavior, the more compelling it becomes. This is why social media platforms emphasize follower counts, why businesses highlight millions of satisfied customers, and why live audiences in television shows are instructed to laugh on cue, because laughter is contagious. 5. Situational social proof. In moments of uncertainty, people instinctively mimic the behavior of those around them. If you walk into a restaurant and see everyone ordering a specific dish, you are more likely to assume it is the best option. This effect is particularly strong in crisis situations. When individuals are unsure how to act, they defer to the actions of the majority. By leveraging these different forms of social proof, individuals and organizations can shape perception, build credibility, and increase influence in virtually any domain. The dark side of social proof. When conformity becomes dangerous. While social proof is a powerful tool for influence, it also has a dark side. The same mechanism that compels people to follow positive trends can also lead them down dangerous paths. Mass hysteria, financial bubbles, cult behavior, and mob mentality all stem from the same psychological process that makes social proof so compelling. The bystander effect is one of the most infamous examples of social proof gone wrong. When individuals witness an emergency in a public setting, they often fail to intervene because they assume that if others are not reacting, there is no need to act. The diffusion of responsibility causes paralysis. Everyone assumes someone else will step in, leading to collective inaction. Similarly, social proof fuels groupthink, where critical thinking is suppressed in favor of maintaining harmony within a group. This phenomenon has been responsible for some of history's greatest disasters, from corporate collapses to flawed military strategies. When dissenting voices are silenced due to fear of standing apart, bad decisions go unchallenged and failure becomes inevitable. Recognizing the dangers of blind conformity is crucial. True influence is not about exploiting social proof recklessly, but understanding its effects and using it responsibly. Leveraging social proof for influence and authority. Those who understand social proof can use it to create credibility, attract followers, and establish dominance in their field. Here's how. 1. Build visible momentum. People follow what appears popular, increasing social engagement, highlighting large customer bases, and showcasing positive testimonials all create an illusion of widespread approval, drawing more people in. 2. Associate with authority figures. If you lack direct authority, align with those who have it. Collaborations with respected experts, endorsements from influencers, and affiliations with prestigious institutions enhance perceived credibility. 3. Showcase community participation. People are more likely to engage when they see others doing the same. Encouraging user-generated content, displaying real-time engagement metrics, and emphasizing collective participation can create a sense of belonging. 4. Use exclusivity to amplify demand. Scarcity and social proof go hand in hand. When something is perceived as exclusive, demand increases. Limited edition products, invitation-only access, and insider communities enhance desirability by making participation feel like a privilege. 5. Encourage early adopters to advocate. The first followers of any movement play a crucial role in attracting the masses. Cultivating a loyal base of early adopters and empowering them to spread the message creates a ripple effect that fuels exponential growth. Social proof is one of the most potent psychological forces shaping human behavior. It dictates how trends emerge, how brands rise to dominance, and how leaders establish authority. Those who wield it effectively can guide public perception, generate influence, and build lasting credibility. However, with great power comes responsibility. Understanding social proof is not just about leveraging it, but also recognizing its risks. Chapter 12. The Psychology of Scarcity and Urgency. How limited availability drives action. Scarcity is one of the most powerful motivators in human psychology. When something becomes less available, it instantly increases in perceived value. Whether it's a rare artifact, a limited time offer, or an exclusive event, scarcity triggers a deep-seated fear of missing out. a psychological phenomenon known as FOMO, fear of missing out. This fear can override rational decision-making, compelling people to act impulsively to secure what they believe is slipping from their grasp. Urgency, a close psychological cousin to scarcity, adds a time-sensitive element to the equation. While scarcity emphasizes the limited quantity of an item, urgency emphasizes the limited time available to act. When the brain perceives a deadline, it shifts into action mode, pushing aside hesitation and deliberation. Marketers, salespeople, and influencers have long harnessed this principle to drive conversions, increase demand, and accelerate decision-making. Understanding the psychology of scarcity and urgency allows you to strategically shape perception, influence behavior, and create compelling offers that people feel compelled to act upon. In this chapter, we will explore why scarcity and urgency are so effective, how they alter cognitive processes, and how you can ethically use them to enhance influence in any domain. Why scarcity increases. Perceived value scarcity operates on a simple yet profound principle. People want what they cannot easily have. This principle is deeply ingrained in human nature. When resources are abundant, they are taken for granted, but when they become rare, they are suddenly seen as precious and desirable. The psychology behind this effect is rooted in reactance theory, a concept developed by psychologist Jack Bream. Reactance occurs when people perceive their freedom to choose as being threatened. When access to something is restricted or limited, the brain instinctively rebels against this limitation, making the restricted item even more appealing. This is why children often want a toy more after being told they can't have it, and why people value discontinued products more highly than those readily available. In business, scarcity is used to enhance perceived value in numerous ways. Luxury brands deliberately limit production runs to maintain exclusivity. Limited edition sneakers sell out in minutes because collectors know they won't get a second chance. Even digital products, which are technically infinite, are often presented as available for a limited time to create a sense of urgency. The mere perception that something is running out makes it infinitely more desirable. The fear of missing out, FOMO, and its influence on decision-making. FOMO is a psychological phenomenon that has become especially prevalent in the digital age. Social media constantly exposes people to experiences, products, and events that others are enjoying, making them acutely aware of what they might be missing out on. This awareness triggers an emotional response that drives people to take action, often impulsively, to avoid the discomfort of exclusion. Marketers use FOMO to great effect by creating social scarcity, the idea that everyone else is getting access to something while the individual is at risk of being left behind. Flash sales, exclusive membership programs, and limited-time bonuses all tap into this instinct. Events that are advertised as selling out fast create a rush of demand as people scramble to secure their spot before it's too late. Even content creators use FOMO when influencers post about exclusive events, limited edition products, or trending experiences. Their audience feels an increased urgency to participate. FOMO is particularly effective when combined with social proof. Seeing others act on an opportunity amplifies the sense of urgency. A restaurant with a long wait list is perceived as more desirable. A product labeled "only 3 left in stock" immediately becomes more attractive. When people believe others are securing an opportunity, they feel a heightened need to act before it's too late. Urgency, the brain's response to imminent deadlines. Urgency functions similarly to scarcity, but rather than focusing on quantity, it leverages time pressure to accelerate decision-making. The human brain is naturally wired to prioritize immediate concerns over long-term ones. This is known as temporal discounting. When a deadline is imposed, the brain categorizes the decision as urgent, prompting swift action. This is why limited time sales, countdown timers, and expiring offers are so effective. When people believe they only have a short window to act, they are less likely to overanalyze and more likely to commit. Studies show that time-limited promotions increase conversion rates significantly, even when the product itself is not inherently scarce. The simple presence of a deadline triggers an emotional response that compels immediate action. The airline industry uses urgency masterfully. Flight prices are displayed with warnings like, "Only a few seats left at this price." Booking platforms like Expedia and Airbnb highlight, "X people are looking at this property right now to accelerate decisions." The goal is to prevent deliberation and drive action before rational hesitation sets in. The different types of scarcity and urgency. Scarcity and urgency can be applied in multiple ways, depending on the psychological trigger you want to activate. 1. Limited quantity. Scarcity. When people believe an item is running out, they act quickly. This is why collector's items, luxury watches, and limited edition sneakers generate massive demand. The fewer the items available, the higher their perceived value. 2. Limited time scarcity. Temporary availability creates urgency. Holiday sales, early bird discounts, and one-day-only deals capitalize on this principle by forcing immediate decisions. 3. Exclusive access scarcity. VIP memberships, waitlists, and invitation-only events create demand by making access feel privileged. When people believe they are part of a select few who can participate, they value the opportunity more. 4. Competitive scarcity. When people know others are actively competing for the same resource, their desire intensifies. Online auctions, live ticket sales, and real-time bidding wars trigger this psychological effect by making people feel they must act faster than others to secure what they want. How to use scarcity and urgency ethically. While scarcity and urgency are powerful, they should be used responsibly. False scarcity, such as artificially limiting stock when more is available, can damage credibility if customers feel deceived. The key to ethical influence is authentic scarcity, ensuring that limitations are real, justified, and aligned with the value being offered. 1. Be transparent. If a sale is truly limited time, communicate why. If a product is in limited supply, explain the reason, e.g., handcrafted in small batches, rather than only 3 left. 2. Provide value first. Scarcity should enhance an offer, not be the only reason people want it. A great product or service should stand on its own merits, with scarcity acting as a reinforcement rather than a gimmick. 3. Avoid pressure tactics. Creating urgency should encourage action, but it should not induce anxiety or regret. Ethical urgency empowers customers to make confident decisions rather than feel manipulated into impulse buys. When used correctly, scarcity and urgency enhance rather than exploit. They make experiences more meaningful, drive engagement, and create excitement around an offer. Scarcity and urgency tap into some of the most primal aspects of human psychology. They create an instinctive need to act, driving sales, increasing demand, and influencing behavior in ways that logic alone cannot. When people perceive something as rare, exclusive, or fleeting, they naturally place greater value on it. Understanding these principles allows you to craft compelling offers, increase engagement, and establish authority in any domain. Whether you're launching a product, building a brand, or leading a movement, scarcity and urgency can transform passive interest into decisive action. Chapter 13. The Psychology of Commitment and Consistency. How small actions lead to lasting influence. In the vast landscape of psychological influence, few principles are as enduring and powerful as commitment and consistency. These two forces shape our decisions, reinforce our beliefs, and dictate our behavior in ways both subtle and profound. Human beings have a deep-seated need to align their actions with their self-image, past choices, and public declarations. Once a person takes an initial step, no matter how small, toward a particular course of action, they become far more likely to follow through with larger actions that are consistent with their previous decision. This psychological principle, studied extensively by social psychologists, is one of the primary reasons why persuasion does not always require forceful arguments or grand gestures. Instead, it thrives on small voluntary commitments that pave the way for larger, more meaningful actions. The power of commitment and consistency is seen everywhere, from sales tactics and political campaigns to personal habits and long-term relationships. Once a person states a preference, signs a petition, or agrees to a seemingly minor request, they begin to see themselves as the kind of person who supports that cause or behaves in that manner. This shift in self-perception influences future actions, often leading people to make significant commitments without feeling pressured. Whether it's a simple pledge to reduce plastic use evolving into full environmental activism, or a small financial investment leading to a lifelong brand loyalty, commitment, and consistency shape our behaviors in ways we rarely notice. By understanding how these forces work, you can guide people's decisions, create lasting influence, and even shape their identities over time. In this chapter, we will explore why people strive for consistency, how small commitments lead to powerful transformations, and how this principle can be ethically harnessed to drive engagement, loyalty, and persuasion. Why people strive for consistency. At its core, the need for consistency is rooted in cognitive dissonance theory, first introduced by psychologist Leon Festinger. Cognitive dissonance occurs when a person's actions, beliefs, or values are in conflict with one another, creating an internal state of discomfort. To resolve this discomfort, individuals seek to align their thoughts and behaviors, making decisions that reinforce their previous choices rather than contradict them. This is why people often rationalize bad investments instead of admitting they made a mistake. Why individuals stick to long-standing beliefs even in the face of contradictory evidence, and why small commitments can snowball into deeply ingrained behaviors. Once we make a choice, especially if it is public, written, or requires effort, we feel a strong psychological pull to justify and reinforce that choice. Marketers, political leaders, and social movements leverage this instinct to build loyalty, drive action, and create a sense of identity around a cause or product. By encouraging small commitments, signing a petition, joining a free trial, or verbally agreeing to a belief, they increase the likelihood that individuals will make larger, more significant commitments in the future. The initial step serves as a mental anchor, setting the stage for progressively greater levels of engagement. The power of the foot in the door technique. One of the most well-documented applications of commitment and consistency is the foot in the door technique. This psychological tactic involves making a small, low-effort request first, before gradually increasing the size of the ask. Studies show that once a person agrees to a minor request, they become significantly more likely to comply with a larger request later, as refusing would create inconsistency with their previous behavior. A famous experiment in the 1960s by psychologists Friedman and Fraser demonstrated the power of this technique. Researchers approached homeowners and asked them to display a small sticker supporting safe driving. Weeks later, those who had agreed to this minor request were far more likely to consent to a much larger, more intrusive sign being placed in their yards. Their initial, seemingly insignificant commitment influenced their self-perception, leading them to see themselves as supporters of the cause, making them more likely to escalate their involvement. This principle is used in countless real-world scenarios. Retailers offer free trials because people who commit to using a product, even temporarily, are more likely to justify keeping it, leading to increased conversions. Nonprofits encourage individuals to sign small petitions before asking for donations, increasing the likelihood of financial support. Subscription services allow people to start with a free plan, knowing that once a user has invested time and energy into a platform, they will be reluctant to leave. By strategically structuring requests and engagements, you can create a natural progression that moves people from minor commitments to deep, unwavering loyalty. How commitment shapes identity and behavior. The strongest commitments are those that reshape identity. When people engage in behaviors that align with a particular role, they begin to see themselves as that kind of person, which reinforces future behaviors. A person who runs once a week may simply see themselves as someone trying to stay active, but if they sign up for a marathon, even if it's months away, they suddenly view themselves as a runner. This identity shift increases their likelihood of staying consistent with training, investing in running gear, and joining a community of other runners. This principle is the foundation of many habit-forming behaviors. People who make small dietary changes and publicly declare their commitment to healthy eating become more invested in the identity of being health-conscious. Someone who volunteers at a local shelter once may do so again, not just out of obligation, but because they begin to see themselves as a caring, charitable person. Brands leverage this principle by transforming their customers into members of a community rather than just consumers. Apple, for example, doesn't just sell technology, it cultivates a sense of identity. Customers who buy an iPhone aren't just purchasing a device, they are becoming part of an ecosystem, reinforcing their identity as innovative, tech-savvy individuals. Similarly, social movements don't just ask people to support a cause, they shape self-perception, turning supporters into activists, advocates, and lifelong believers. How to use commitment and consistency to influence others. To ethically harness the power of commitment and consistency, consider these strategic applications. 1. Start small. Get people to take a low-risk, easy action first. This could be a free sign-up, a minor pledge, or a simple agreement to a statement. Small steps open the door to larger commitments. 2. Encourage public declarations. Public commitments are stronger than private ones. When people announce goals, sign pledges, or declare beliefs in front of others, they feel more compelled to uphold them. 3. Use written agreements. Contracts, petitions, and written affirmations deepen commitment. Even signing a digital agreement increases psychological ownership of a decision. 4. Create identity-based motivation. Frame commitments as part of an individual's identity. Instead of encouraging someone to try vegetarian food, reinforce their choice as becoming a more environmentally conscious eater. 5. Build progressive engagement. Structure experiences so that each step naturally leads to the next. Free trials lead to subscriptions, small donations lead to larger ones, minor activism leads to deeper involvement. Commitment and consistency are two of the most underestimated forces in persuasion. Once a person takes an initial step, they begin a psychological journey that reshapes their decisions, beliefs, and self-perception. A single small action can create a ripple effect, leading individuals down a path of greater involvement, stronger convictions, and lasting influence. By understanding and applying these principles, you can guide behaviors, build loyal communities, and create movements that sustain themselves over time. The key is not coercion, but voluntary commitment, allowing people to take ownership of their decisions in a way that naturally reinforces long-term consistency. Chapter 14. The Psychology of Authority: How Perceived Power Shapes Influence. Throughout history, authority has been one of the most potent forces of influence. The mere presence of an authoritative figure can shape behaviors, override personal beliefs, and inspire unwavering obedience, even when the actions being commanded seem irrational or unethical. People are wired to respond to authority because, In most cases, deference to knowledgeable, powerful figures has ensured survival, order, and progress. Whether in governments, corporations, social groups, or personal relationships, authority creates a sense of structure and direction, guiding individuals to act in ways they might not have chosen on their own. The power of authority is not necessarily derived from brute force or direct coercion. Instead, it often works through perceived legitimacy, expertise, and social expectations. When people believe someone has the right to command, whether due to status, knowledge, or a symbolic position of power, they instinctively comply, even if it conflicts with their personal desires or moral compass. This tendency has been demonstrated in psychological experiments, historical events, and everyday social interactions, revealing just how deeply ingrained the obedience reflex is in human behavior. In this chapter, we will explore why authority is so effective, how it can be used to shape opinions and actions, and how one can cultivate an authoritative presence to enhance persuasion. Understanding this principle will not only help you recognize when you are being influenced, but will also allow you to harness authority ethically, to lead, inspire, and guide others effectively. Why people obey authority without question. One of the most famous demonstrations of obedience to authority comes from Stanley Milgram's experiment in the 1960s. In this study, participants were instructed to administer increasingly severe electric shocks to a person in another room whenever they answered a question incorrectly. The shocks were not real, but the participants did not know this. As the intensity of the supposed shocks increased, the victim, an actor, would scream in pain, beg for the experiment to stop, and eventually fall silent. Despite their visible distress, most participants continued to administer shocks simply because an authoritative figure in a white lab coat insisted they continue. This experiment revealed a powerful truth about human nature. When authority commands, most people obey, even against their own moral judgment. Participants were not inherently cruel. They were ordinary individuals who found themselves in a situation where authority dictated their actions. The presence of formal attire, scientific setting, and assertive language gave the experimenter a legitimate aura of power, compelling participants to override their instincts and follow orders. The reason for this response lies in social conditioning and hierarchical structures. From childhood, people are taught to trust experts, obey teachers, follow rules, and defer to those in higher positions. This conditioning remains throughout adulthood, where bosses, law enforcement, and political leaders continue to serve as authoritative figures. The social order depends on obedience, and while this system has many benefits, it also makes people vulnerable to manipulation when authority is misused. The symbols and triggers of authority. Not all authority is enforced through direct commands. Often, authority is established through subtle signals and symbols that trigger automatic compliance in others. These symbols convey status, knowledge, or legitimacy, leading people to accept statements, follow instructions, or make decisions without question. Some of the most common triggers of authority include titles and credentials. People are more likely to believe and obey individuals with formal titles like doctor, professor, CEO, or judge. Academic degrees, professional certifications, and affiliations with prestigious institutions also enhance credibility. Uniforms and formal attire. Police officers, medical professionals, military personnel, and corporate executives command immediate respect due to their visual representation of authority. Even a well-tailored suit or white lab coat can elevate perceived expertise. Confidence and assertiveness. People associate certainty and strong speech patterns with knowledge and leadership. An individual who speaks with conviction, maintains eye contact, and uses decisive language is often perceived as an authority, regardless of their actual expertise. Endorsements and associations. Authority is often transferred through associations with recognized figures or institutions. A brand endorsed by a trusted expert, a book with a foreword by a well-known leader, or a product backed by scientific studies will command greater influence than one without authoritative validation. Scarcity and exclusivity. People assume that exclusive knowledge or restricted access is a sign of authority. Secretive government documents, insider business strategies, and privileged information all carry a sense of power, making those who possess them seem more authoritative. By understanding these symbols, you can both recognize when they are being used to influence you and strategically apply them to enhance your own presence, leadership, and persuasive ability. How authority shapes beliefs and decisions. Authority not only influences obedience, but also has a profound effect on belief formation. When people hear information from a perceived expert, they are far more likely to accept it as truth, even without critical analysis or verification. This is why misinformation can spread rapidly if it comes from an authoritative figure, even when the facts are questionable. For example, during the early 20th century, cigarette companies used doctors in advertisements to endorse smoking. At the time, medical authority was rarely questioned, so the public accepted the idea that smoking was safe or even beneficial. Decades later, when legitimate medical studies revealed the dangers of smoking, the public faced cognitive dissonance. They had to reconcile their previous trust in medical authority with the new evidence. In politics, leaders use official speeches, expert panels, and authoritative branding to shape public opinion. When people hear a claim from a government official or a renowned economist, they are more likely to accept it than if the same statement were made by an unknown individual. The perception of credibility often outweighs the actual validity of the argument. This psychological tendency also explains why financial advisors, legal experts, and high-ranking executives command such strong influence, even when individuals do not fully understand complex financial plans or legal contracts. They trust the expertise of those who do. As a result, authority figures wield immense power in shaping financial decisions, health choices, and political beliefs. Cultivating an authoritative presence. Understanding the psychology of authority allows you to not only recognize its effects, but also cultivate your own authoritative presence to enhance leadership and persuasion. Whether in business, public speaking, or personal influence, establishing authority requires a combination of expertise, confidence, and strategic positioning. To build authority effectively, consider the following strategies. 1. Develop expertise. People trust individuals who demonstrate deep knowledge in their field. Continuously educate yourself, stay updated on industry trends, and position yourself as a subject matter expert through writing, speaking engagements, and thought leadership. 2. Command presence through confidence. Speak with clarity, avoid hesitations, and project certainty. Confidence, even when not backed by absolute knowledge, increases perceived authority. 3. Use titles and associations. If you hold professional titles or credentials, display them prominently. Align yourself with authoritative institutions, reputable brands, and respected figures to enhance credibility. 4. Master nonverbal authority. Signals, posture, eye contact, attire, and vocal tone play a crucial role in commanding respect. A person who looks and sounds authoritative will naturally be treated as such. 5. Leverage social proof. When others vouch for your expertise, it amplifies your authority. Collect testimonials, endorsements, and case studies that showcase your credibility. Authority is one of the most powerful tools of influence, shaping societies, institutions, and personal interactions. However, it carries a dual edge. When used ethically, it fosters leadership, trust, and stability. When misused, it can lead to manipulation, blind obedience, and even societal harm. Recognizing the mechanisms of authority allows you to navigate its influence, protect yourself from deceptive power structures, and wield it responsibly in your own pursuits. As we conclude this exploration of psychological influence, remember that mastering these principles is not just about persuading others, but about understanding human nature itself. Influence is not about coercion, but about guiding decisions in a